Now, before I start introducing our speaker, how many people here have heard about crypto? Not that crypto, the other one. Cryptography, which I think, I don't know, they just hijacked the name.
There's only one crypto.
There is only one crypto, okay. And how many people heard about cipher codes or crypto, TLS, SSL? Okay, there's a good portion of people. So I think we can go heavily technical. Personally, I mean, you probably heard about Caesar cipher, encryption, things that people are doing back in the days. Personally, I was never close to one of these machines that does the decryption, which are right here. So we are very grateful to have a person here that can really introduce us to these machines and how these things work. And please put your hand together for Mike from Australian Spy Museum.
One, two. How are we going? Getting audio, I think we are. Or Butte. There's about 6 or 8 chairs down the front here, so please come on down. Get comfy. Oh, come on. Bear with me one sec. All right. So first of all, I want to say thanks to SecTalks for having us along. I really appreciate that. Secondarily, to Atlassian for offering us this wonderful venue. And thirdly, kind of a thanks to the cyber and IT industry. I owe such a lot to the cyberspace. I'm very, very grateful for that and for having worked with some amazing people. And sometimes these talks, I run into former colleagues, which is always awesome. For anyone I haven't met before, again, thank you. Can I ask you to do one thing for me? Follow Australian Spy Museum. I don't care what your favourite drug is, except for X. We don't do Nazi shit, right? I'm sorry. I'm very unapologetic about that. I have a real problem with people who are on the anti-democratic authoritarian train. So we're on Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, which is nearly as bad, not quite. LinkedIn, if you are a bit of a masochist. And each week I will post an object from our collection. And typically I'll give you a few paragraphs worth of detail, which is more than what you typically learn in a museum. So my intent is to give you kind of drip-feed some technical information to teach you a bit about the background of cryptography, spycraft, covert messaging. So you go away a bit more understanding of kind of the roots of where cyber came from, right? I'm not talking about the bits and bytes. I'm talking about the underlying methodologies, the processes, and the psychology, which underpins a lot of our attackers today. I understand that this talk is going to prompt a lot of questions. So I'll get a few of them out of the way up front, you know, the who, why, what, where. So who? I'm just a Joe Schmo. I'm not some billionaire. I don't have a PhD. I didn't build these machines. I'm just someone who worked in cyber, who, and God help me, I'm nearly 60 now, late in career, thought that there is a hole in the centre of our industry. There is a missing piece. If you go out there and if you look at all the industries that we protect, you know, we protect retail, transport, government, logistics, all of these different industries, they typically have museums, libraries, cultural centres, places of learning that young people come in, they pick up a kind of a cultural understanding of what they're about as an industry, not at the organisation level, but where we kind of fit in the big machine. And we draw people in kind of kindly and give them kind of a real background. So things like the Maritime Museum for the maritime industry, that kind of thing. Cyber protects all of those other industries. And we don't have any kind of cultural heartland. There's no library, like central library. I mean, I know you can go online and do e-learning. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about going back to the 1500s and books about cryptography and stuff, right? There's nowhere where you can literally see the end-to-end evolution of the technology that went from analog, right? From clockwork, mechanical, electromechanical, transistorized and digital, but still with that same mentality of the attacker, still with an adversarial mindset. right? And the conversations that we have with the general public, that is with real people, you know, actual humans who have a job to do to generate revenue for their industries, while we're busy protecting them, they can't relate to what we do because they didn't grow up in an adversarial relationship the way we do. And I can't tell you in my cyber career how many times I had trouble explaining what we do and why it's important and how cyber espionage is a real thing. So what I've set out to do is to build something that helps us kooks explain to normal people where threats came from. That's the name of the game, right? The what, it's basically a huge pile of stuff that lives in storage sheds because I don't have a facility yet. I've got somewhere like, I don't know, somewhere north of 1,800 objects looking for a home. And this year I'm trying to figure out where to put them. Yeah, I saw that look. So I can tell you we have upwards of well over 100 spy cameras, from little microdot cameras the size of the end of my thumb, right through to enormous things, Russian devices for peering through walls. We have literally dozens of cipher systems, dozens of secret communication devices. We have books on cryptography going back to the 1500s. We have devices, and it's a bastard of a collection to manage, because I have to figure out how to safely keep track of KGB microdots, which are the size of a dot of lead pencil on a page. How the hell do you manage that stuff, right? It's been a challenge. So there are many things that I want to do with this collection, but it's fundamentally about us. And I am just devastated that the state government has effectively put a nail into the powerhouse, which was the only thing in the city that was built specifically for nerds. I think us nerds deserve to have our own place. And with that, I'm going to hop off the soapbox. And now you know what it's all about. Right. So what's in the collection? I already mentioned cultural. Tradecraft includes cameras, recorders, bugs, countermeasures, equipment, lockpicking stuff. All of those get smart gadgets that you would use as an agent for the collection, transfer, compromat, all those sorts of things. Covert communications, I already mentioned spy radios, there's burst encoders, you know, crazy ass laser equipment, voice over infrared, all sorts of freaky things from the Stasi that use non-visible spectrum. Cryptography, of course. Now, birth of cyber is super interesting. What I mean by birth of cyber is going back to the 40s and looking at the nature of electromechanical crypto. And if you remember, if you did your homework and you saw the movie The Imitation Game, there's that little quote, what if only a machine can defeat another machine, right? So going back to the days when a single bit of information was like so, right? A big valve on a pluggable module on an IBM 604. Those things, of course, filled a room. And so I'm very, very interested in looking at how Baudo code became digital, going back before the kind of home computers that people typically have collections of today. And then Cold War. And we have an enormous collection of KGB and Stasi equipment, because personally, I think it's really interesting to peer into the guts of our opponent, right? And look at how threat actors actually manifest and execute their work. Super awesome. I don't know how many pieces of Stasi and KGB equipment we've got. It'd be, I don't know, like everything from photo fits and forensics kits to, you know, literally the stamps that they used to rubber stamp at the Berlin Wall and Christ knows what else. So all sorts of interesting things. And clocks at the end of the table. Now, I like to start with putting Enigma in context. It's a continuum, right? It's an evolutionary curve. So what was around before Enigma? Now, I've previously shared these couple of devices. The Caesar cipher, which you might have heard of, was a simple monoalphabetic substitution, right? In other words, an A could become a Z, or a D could become an R, or something like a single shift. And those were typically done on a little disk. This is a very rare French device, but they were used in things like, well, all the way through the Dark Ages. You can find examples of those in books from the 1500s, right through to the US Civil War, and believe it or not, into World War I. When the United States entered World War I, they had a little device that was printed on celluloid. It's very fragile, and it was just a simple 2 alphabets rotating against each other. And of course, without good discipline in terms of setting up keys, that could be compromised very, very easily, right? So disks is the first type of old device. Another one is cylinders. So if you take the idea of a single disk, and now you create multiple alphabets, different alphabets per disk, and then you arrange those on a spindle, now you've got a much more interesting device. So Jefferson in the US is credited with rediscovering that tech, but it's actually older than that. This is a device called an M94. It's American. It's an improved device from World War I. And the key for this machine, of course, consists of the order in which you put those discs on the central spindle, right? The device in the bottom right is called the Lugan Sphinx, French. And being the classiest people in the world, is this lovely little thing, comes in a velvet box. And the Sphinx, of course, refers to the breaking of the hieroglyphs by the French around about 1820. The Rosetta Stone, of course, was discovered in Egypt. The British snatched it, so it's now in the British Museum, with a whole lot of other stolen stuff, but the French actually cracked the hieroglyphs, and that kicked off a huge amount of interest. I'm going to have to do a bit of creative dance up here or something like that, so what's going on? Anyone want to help troubleshoot? There we go. Well,
Back on.
we're back on. Geez, I hope that doesn't happen every 5 minutes. That would be really annoying. Let's go back a slide. Right. So the French broke the hieroglyphs, and it triggered this enormous interest in cryptography in France all through the 19th century. So Vezin and Diverge and a whole lot of other people put out books on really quite advanced cryptographic methods. And I promised that tonight I would bring along some toys that I have never shown before. We have a sub-collection on French cryptography. I don't believe this is probably unique in the world, but close to it. There's probably one locked in a vault somewhere in France, but this device is using the slider type methodology. It was used on the link between the resistance in Marseille back to Paris during World War II. It's a very rare device. It is the only example I've ever seen. And another similar device based on sliders. This one is British. And we managed to acquire this unit complete with the original top secret instruction sheet, which says, once you've read this, do destroy it. So, of course, some bugger didn't follow orders. Let that be your first lesson to take away from here, right? Operational procedure is king. And you will find out later that where people didn't follow operational procedure, that opened up enormous chinks in the armor of the Enigma mystery, which allowed it to be decrypted. Again, I invite you to come and take a seat down the front. There's at least 4 chairs down here. So we see rods or sliders, grids, cylinders, and discs before Enigma. And then during World War I, something fascinating happens. 4 people almost simultaneously come up with the idea of applying electricity to cryptography to drive machines. You know, electricity was used for various things in the 19th century. Street lighting began to happen. The telegraph, of course, an enormous variety of quack medicine machines. It's always fun to go on eBay and look under quack machine or quack medicine and find these crazy ass things with a dynamo and a couple of handles you hang on to. I think Scientology still does that stuff. But Edward Hebern in the US, this machine is actually a photograph of the machine in the NSA Museum at Fort Meade. It's an awesome museum. If you ever find yourself in the part of the world around Washington or New York, it is well worth time. Going down the I-95 to Fort Meade, they have the most incredible museum there. That same machine is also in the Moscow Cryptography Museum, which is also awesome. I haven't been to that one, funnily enough. But Hebern was doing time in jail for horse theft. He had plenty of time on his hands. I don't know what that says about cyber vendors today, but anyway, he was doing time in jail for horse theft, and he came up with the idea of a single rotor machine, and the silver ring you see there is the single rotor. They then went on to create 3 and 5 rotor machines, but he came a cropper. Funnily enough, I think he was done for securities fraud in the end, for inflating company revenues ahead of the actuals. Arvid Dam in Sweden built a machine. There's only a couple of fragments left of his tech. That one's again in the NSA Museum. And then down the back, Arthur Scherbius in Germany. Now, Scherbius got the credit for this machine for a long time. And then we got a surprise early in the 21st century. We discovered that it wasn't actually the Germans who first came up with that machine. The Enigma patent was actually initially developed by 2 Dutch sailors in the East Indies. These 2 fellows, and so, you know, maximum respect. They did amazing work. They hired a lawyer, but through ways and means, their technology was stolen by a German brother-in-law. and they actually went to go and patent the device, but because it was wartime, the Dutch wouldn't let them do it. With the end of hostilities, they went to go and patent their device, only to find out that Shervis and his crew had stolen their patent. Awful. Anyway, we honour them here. So Enigma went through its own evolution. Now that machine at the top left, the Handel machine, right, because you used a big mechanical crank handle, was based on a print engine. So was the next one called the Schreibende Enigma and the Schreibende H at the bottom left. Now the two at the top, there are no surviving examples of those machines. They were big, heavy things. So to give you an idea, the one at the top left, I mean, kind of looking at it, it looks to me to be the volume of 2 IBM Selectric typewriters, right? Or basically 2 sewing machines, if your mum had one of those things. These are big machines and they would have been very heavy. The one at the bottom left, the Schreibende H, 2 of those have survived. One turned up in Argentina a few years ago. It was one of 4 units sold to the Argentine military. And there was another one, not quite complete, that turned up in Hungary. It has subsequently disappeared from view. And I suspect it's probably decorating some Hungarian general's office or something. But thankfully, 2 of those have survived. And then, unfortunately, because they were based on printers, they were all clumsy and ugly mechanical things to operate, right? And the nice thing about them was that they were single operator machines. A printed character, the encrypted result is output. That's good, right? On the other hand, a machine that breaks down frequently and requires me to manually intervene is operationally really bad. So the trade-off was there was a second line of development for the Glühlampen machine, or the glowing lamp output machine, which is what we have here. And so in the mid-1920s, the Glühlampen machine became a 2-operator machine. One person types in the clear text, the cipher text comes up on the lamp, and the second operator records that result. And the reverse happens on the way on the decrypt process, right? And that's why, if you see, there are very, very few photos of the Germans using these machines in the field. They actually had printed instructions, don't take photos, but there are very few surviving. There's always 2 operators for that reason. One person does the typing, the other one is recording the results from the glowing lamps. And this is what the machine looked like in the mid-20s. And we're going to switch here for a little close-up of this machine. And what we have here is, at the front, obviously the keyboard. We have the row of lamps behind it, which light up. The selector switch switches between different power supplies. So internal to the box, we have a battery box up the back. And then here we have 2 terminals for like a 4-volt transformer. You can select between those. And then this is the top of the crypto engine of the machine. They look like shark fin sticking up. They're actually little thumb wheels, which as you push them, you're adjusting the rotors for the crypto engine in the machine. If I open up the machine, now you get a better idea of kind of how it's laid out internally. And this is the piece by the way, this function in PowerPoint is called Cameo. You can insert an object now instead of a text block or a rectangle or whatever, you can insert a cameo. And when you're presenting, the cameo object is replaced with whatever's on your webcam, okay? So I know that's a typical question people have. So what we have here is the crypto engine of Enigma. And you'll see these 3 fins here are 3 rotors. The machine takes up to 3 rotors from a set of 5. Then we have what's called the reflector, and we have the entry rotor. That's how the electric signal comes into the machine. Now, if I back off here just a little bit, I'm going to press, say, the letter O up in the back corner, and you'll see that we get a resulting lamp. In fact, it's the one right next to my finger. So that was the letter L. Now, I can press O all day long, all week, and all year. And the one letter that will never come up is what? Letter O. And I'll explain to you why that is. In the machine, when I press a key, I'm closing a switch, right? Energy is flowing out of the battery up here. It goes underneath the chassis. The switch is closed with me pressing the key. The energy then flows up through here into a cable that hits the entry rotor. And what the entry rotor does is it takes that 26-wire cable and it splits it around the circumference of a fixed rotor. And being a fixed rotor, now what I can do is I can put the movable rotors and they rotate against it. And what that's doing is with every key press, it's bringing new contacts into play with each other, right? So the entry rotor is obviously a great idea because it allows us to mechanically create a rotor machine. But why do we never get an O when we press an O? Well, that's due to the reflector. If I flip the latch on the machine and I pull the reflector out of the way, if I squeeze the rotors together, I can lift the crypt engine out of the machine. And you'll see they have flat contacts on one side and they have spring contacts on the other side. When you squeeze them together, obviously what that does is under spring pressure, it brings the contacts into play with each other. When I drop it back in, it goes back into the spindle. Oh, sorry, I was going to tell you the essential reason why O doesn't become O. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. You'll notice, however, that on the reflector, which is this piece here, there are likewise 26 contacts going around the circumference. So what happens is when I press a key, like the letter O, energy flows from the battery to that key. I close the switch, it passes through that letter, it then comes up through the entry rotor, it gets scrambled through the crypto engine, and then it hits the reflector. Well, somehow I've got to pick up that signal and turn it around, and it's got to end up on a lamp. Well, an electrical path can never go back on itself, right? So if it enters the crypt engine as an O, it can't go back out and light up the O lamp. So what the reflector does is it takes 26 letters and it maps each of them to a different letter. So 26 letters become 13 pairs. And that is the weakness of Enigma. It gives me, well, one weakness of Enigma. It gives me a tiny chink in the crypto, which allows me to kind of attack it. What's far more significant, of course, is sloppy process. People who don't follow orders in the setup and maintenance of the machines, or who allow code material to be captured, who reuse initialization settings, those sorts of things. We drop the crypto engine back in, we rotate it to make sure it's flipping freely, clamp the reflector back in place, and now we're ready to go. Okay.
Again, what's the O lamp? What's the O key? Are these in the
Yeah. So for instance, if I press the O key, there you go. We're not quite locked in because we're not getting a lamp coming up. Right. So if you see how I'm pressing the O key up in the back corner, and that time I'm getting the result Q, right? Maps to the Q. I press it again, and now I'm getting an L. I press it again, and I'm getting a J. What will never happen is if I press the letter, I won't get the corresponding lamp coming up. I will never press the O letter and get the O lamp coming on. And the reason is just because in the electrical path of the machine, it goes through a convoluted process to get scrambled, and then it comes back and it goes through the scrambling process a second time. But because I've got 26 letters to play with, if I want to turn that electrical signal around and send it back through the machine, it can't enter the crypto engine as an O and then come back down the same electrical path, right? It's got to go through the machine and come back as a different letter to complete the circuit. If I had a whiteboard, I'll draw it for you. But essentially, that's the weakness of the reflector. I've got 26 letters to play with. I send the electrical signal through the machine as, I don't know, a G or a K or whatever. It can't come back as the same result. Yes.
Just sending it twice. I'm not picking it up on the other end.
It could do, but the thinking was when the machine was designed that, well, it is simpler in one way to only have one path, but the thinking was because it was scrambled twice that it was stronger. In actual fact, it weakens the machine for that reason because of the reflector function, right? So that's kind of architecturally the machine. Now, I'm going to pass this around. No audience has ever failed me yet. You're not going to do it today. I'm going to show you one other interesting thing about the rotors. So when we think about the machine, the operators are given 3 rotors in the machine plus 2 more. And every day you're given a book which tells you which rotors to put in the machine. Yeah. So there's our box with the spare rotors in it. So if you think about it, if the machine only has 3 rotors in it and I get a choice of 5, that means that in slot number 1, I've got 5 choices. Slot number 2, I have 4 choices left. Slot number 3, I have 3 choices left. So 5 times 4 times 3, there are 60 potential combinations that I can put the rotors in. And here's where it starts getting interesting. On the rotor, and I'll attempt to show it well, there is a little notch at the front just here. And it's that notch that drives the rotor rotational behavior. So when I press a key, I want you to look at the rightmost rotor. I'm going to press once and you'll see this turn over, turn over, turn over. Only when that is turned over 26 times, then you saw the second one turn over once. It's just like the odometer in a car. The rightmost wheel turns over 26 times, then the next one turns over once. Only when that's turned over 26 times does the third rotor turn over once. Again, it's a weakness, right? Another interesting thing is if I know for sure that the Germans will never reuse the rotor order in a month, the further I go through the month, the easier it gets to predict what the rotor order might be on the remaining days, right? There are just less variables. And so when I'm setting up my bomb machines to attack a decrypt, there are less variables to play with as I go through a month. Now, it's this little notch here on the inside of the rotor ring that drives that rotational behavior. And in an act of utter bastardry, the Germans came up with a great idea, which is if I put a nail in there, I can actually adjust that slip ring position relative to the circumference of the rotor. So on Monday, the rotor rolls over when it gets in position 8. On Tuesday, it's in position 22. On Wednesday, it's in position 11 or whatever. That's a genuine rotor. I'll pass that around. You can have a look at that. And so this is a very interesting design for a machine, which is it's kind of elegantly beautiful, right? The way that it's put together. As someone who appreciates good engineering, I just find this fabulous to look at. So this was the state of Enigma until we hit 1935. The machine was sold with 3 rotors, keyboard, lamp board, 3 rotors, lamp output. In 1935, actually just before World War II, the Germans introduced an extra couple of rotors to give more variability, create a bigger key space, and they did this. They added at the front what's called the Steckerbrett, or the plug board. And what the plug board does is you're given a set of 12 of these little cables, little dual pin cable. And every day, according to a menu, you now not only set up the rotor order and the slip ring position, you also map 10 arbitrary letters to 10 other letters. Everyone on the radio network maps their letters the same way. So if I compromise the code material for a given ship in the North Atlantic, it's very likely that the submarines in that same area are on the same radio network, right? If I compromise, and let's face it, you know, the Germans and the Russians were going back and forth over each other's positions all over the place in Russia. If I compromise a German position in Kharkov, it's very likely that in Sebastopol, they're on the same radio network, right? So it was very, very important to capture the code books because the knowledge of how to set up the machine every day and the remapping of the letters was absolutely crucial to reduce the hump space to try and work out the remaining variables. So, a credit to Dirk Ryman that's actually put this diagram together. It's not mine, but I haven't seen a better representation of it. So this is a slice horizontally through the Enigma through the side. And the way that the machine works is that when I press a key, so up here I'm pressing, say, the letter O, it pushes down and it closes this switch here at the bottom of the machine. When that switch is closed, energy comes out of the battery box, flows into the machine. If there is no Stecker plug present for that letter, right? So today it's not on the menu of the 10 letters. It goes down the back of the machine and it empties the crypto engine, goes through the scrambling rotors, hits the reflector, come back as a different letter, right? Goes back through the scramblers a second time. And on its path back to the lamp board, this time on the way out, the letter, say, J, is steckered to say the letter E. So the power flows out of the machine through the Stecker cable as a J, re-enters as an E, and now it lights up the letter E. So it could be that if I didn't have a plug in place, it might have lit up the letter R, but because, or sorry, it might have lit up the letter J, but because I've got Stecker J plugged to E, it comes up as a different letter. And that's what explodes the crypto mathematics of Enigma, is the remapping of those 10 letters every day. And so you go from 60 potential rotor combinations times 26 slip ring positions for the first rotor. So now you've got 1,500 odd combinations times 26 for the second slip ring, 40,000 combinations times 26 for the third one, 1 million combinations, and that's before you hit the Stecker board, right? It's an enormous problem to attack. You cannot brute force it. It's just too big a problem. So you need some key material to help you. And what does that look like? In the early 2000s, the British released examples of the German key sheets. So we're going to go to October 1944, shortly after D-Day, and we've picked the date, the 23rd. And on the 23rd, so for each row, starting at the bottom and working its way up, they have different settings for the machine. And those are, first of all, the Walzenlager. And Walzenlager is the order that the rotors go into the machine, right? So today we've got rotors 5, 2, and 3. Then there's the Ringstellung, the slip ring positions that drive the odometer. And for rotor number 5, it has to be in position 11. Rotor 2, it has to be in position 21. And rotor 3, it has to be in position 08. Now, if this seems like a bastard of a thing to have to do at midnight every day, remember, it's the only thing that keeps you secure versus operational insecurity versus an entire Russian tank army, for instance, right? It is so devastatingly important to follow this process exactly and to protect this key material and burn it at the first opportunity. And if your position is likely to be compromised, to do whatever it takes, to throw it into a lake. Favorite methods of destructions for machines were to smash them with bayonets and then throw the rotors into a lake, to throw it into a shell hole with a pile of grenades, anything to destroy the machines and the key material. Because if I compromise this, not only do I have rearward-facing information that allows me to decrypt past information, but I have a forward-looking view to what your settings will be tomorrow as well to reduce the hunt space. Then there's the Steckerverbindungen, which is the remapping of the letters versus each other. And finally, something called the Kenngruppen. And the Kenngruppen is a date indicator. So let's, for instance, say you get a radio message at 12:30 in the morning. Your first question is going to be, hang on, was that created with today's settings, as in from midnight to now, or was that created with yesterday's settings? So the Kenngrupping in the header goes into the header of the message is just a quick check, sort of check that goes, no, it was created with yesterday's, right? To save you stuffing around with the machine and testing it. And so I've got a choice of 4 of those, and I can pick any one of those 4 to go into the header of my message, and that tells you that this message was set up with yesterday's settings. So once again, keyboard, lamp board, rotors, free of, when I press a key, energy flows from the battery box through the closed switch in the key, under the chassis, through the entry rotor, gets scrambled once, hits the reflector, turn around and come back, and then it hits a lamp. And if those keys are mapped to another lamp, then a different lamp shows up, right? Cool. Put a message together. So we've got our message sheet for 23rd of October 44. And now we would use a Spruch form or Funkspruch form, where we write out our message in clear text prior to encryption, and it has fields for the various metadata that goes into my message. Now, there's a guy who never gets nearly enough credit at Bletchley Park. His name was Irving John Good, and Irving John Good ran the statistical analysis program at Bletchley. And it's important to understand that the sheer volume of information that was coming through kind of defied the ability for humans to be able to process it all. But what they could do was take all the metadata, create Hollerith cards for it, process it in bulk, and then take horizontal slices through the data coming out of the Hollerith accounting machines to be able to find trends in the data. And that whole program is run by Irving John Good. And that, as far as I'm concerned, is the forerunner of industrialized threat intelligence handling, right? They created a complete process to capture the information, categorize it, metadata it, and run it through an automated process that they could query. And fuck me, they built the first SIM, right? This is a very cool kind of thing. So I pick any 2 random letters plus the 3 letters off the Kenngruppen. That's the first thing that goes into my message. I obviously write down the clear text. So I'm going to send the message submarines. There's my initials as the sender. There's the receiver's initials. There's the time that the message goes out. There's the number of characters in the machine, which is the Kenngruppen plus the clear text. And this is wild. They actually include the initial rotor position. And you think, well, hang on, that's crazy, right? How could they possibly betray a part of the key information? And it's simply because the Germans believed that the rest of the machine setup, right, the rotor order, not the rotor position, not the letter on the rotor, but the rotor order multiplied by the Ringstellung slip ring positions multiplied by the letter was such a big mathematical problem that it could not be solved. And so they were okay to actually tell you the initial setting in the headers. Then you've got to dream up something to generate a secret. And I've picked a terrible example. Can anyone think of why?
Because it's like the initial of somebody.
Correct, because I'm using a fragment of the clear text to generate my secret. That's operationally a terrible idea, but I'm doing it to illustrate a point, right? You would never, ever use a decrypt secret or the seed to kind of generate the secret that was a fragment of the clear text. Similarly, you would never use the three letters twice. You were always hunting, using your memory to pick another 3 letters. You would never use the first 3 letters of your girlfriend's name. Multiple people got in trouble doing that sort of thing. And so you would have to think of 3 letters. So the first thing you're doing is you're setting your machine to ABC. And that's position 1, 2, 3, right? So letters ABC correspond to, geez, I'm getting old. I can't read this upside down. 1. Where are we? 2019, I'm going the wrong way. 1, 2. Hang on, 3. Now, when I type in the letters, when it's in position ABC and I type in the letters SUB, because of the combination of rotors, etc., on the machine, what I'm going to get out of it right, here we go. So S, I get the letter W. Oh, there you go. I just gave the game away. You're going to get the letters WAW. You're going to get the letters WAW. And what you're going to send to the recipient is the result of encrypting the word submarines, but you're going to use the decrypt indicator WAW. So what I basically mean by that is, let's go back one slide. So here's our machine. And I've set it up with the initial rotor positions 1, 2, 3, or ABC. And I'm going to enter S, and the first letter that comes up is W. I enter a U, the next letter that comes up is A, then I enter a B, and I get WAW. So I've generated a decrypt key. Now that decrypt key goes into the header of my message, and I encrypt the word submarines using the letters WAW. Sorry, using the letters SUB. I'm not going to tell you what SUB is. You're going to work that out, because when you get my message, this is what you're going to receive. You're going to receive this in the headers. You'll get the decrypt indicator, but not the secret material. You're not going to know that it's the letters SUB. And then you're going to get DGKQN. You're going to get a whole lot of gibberish, encrypted letters in 5-letter groups or 4-letter groups. We use 4 and 5-letter groups because it destroys word shapes, which makes cryptanalysis a far greater challenge for the other team, right? Now, when I get this thing, as the recipient, I'm going to go, okay, VCX, that tells me which day's code it is. That's great. My machine is set up accordingly. I've got a decrypt indicator of WAW when my rotors are in position ABC. So now I go back to 1, 2, and 3. And now I'm going to find the decrypt secret for this specific message, right? And so if I enter... Oh, the horrors of getting old, I tell you. Okay, right. So W amazingly lights up an S. A lights up a U. W lights up a B. And there's my decrypt secret, SUB. Now what I do is I look inside the lid of the machine, and those letters map to 19, 21, and 2. And so what I do is I then enter the crypto text, which came through on the last slide. And when I enter in those letters, I get the word submarines coming out. Yeah. So if we want to play with that, DG, DDJQN, DDJQN. So D, D, J, Q, N, etc. Yeah. And so that's effectively how it works. Now that's a per message crypto. So everyone on a given radio network has the same rotors in the same position, the same letter mapping, the same slip ring positions, but what they don't know is the per message initial rotor setting. And that's why we go through this process to generate the rotor crypt. So what Bletchley was doing with their machines was they might capture some material which gives them the settings for today, but what they don't know is the rotor positions for each message. And that was the hunt exercise that the bomb machines had to go through, right? And it's really quite an exercise to try and find out the rotor positions for a given day. So we've started with Enigma. Now there's a number of weaknesses in this procedure. First of all, the shared key material, right? If one set of key material gets captured across a radio network, everyone on that radio network is potentially compromised. In fact, is compromised, right? All of their rearward traffic and all their forward traffic can be read by the opponent. That's a major problem. Second major problem, operator error. If I have an operator who's tired, stressed, would you feel stressed with a column of Russian tanks charging at you? I reckon you'd probably be feeling pretty freaking stressed, right? So, you know, when people are stressed or tired or whatever, they make mistakes. They don't follow procedure. They might use their girlfriend's first 3 letters of her name 3 days in a row or something, and they create a wedge into their cryptid traffic. Major problem. So there's various things like that. Then you've got the reflector, etc. So we're going to have a little look now at the influence of Enigma on other machines. And we're going to move across here to a machine which is kind of very similar to Enigma. In fact, it's all Enigma DNA. Before World War II, the Swiss were buying Enigma machines from the Germans. And they found out to their horror in the early days of the war that not only the Germans who sold them their machines could read their traffic, but the Allies were as well. And so what they did was they took everything they learned from the Enigmas that they purchased. They then reused teleprinter keyboards, and within the borders of Switzerland, they developed their own sovereign Enigma cipher machine. So this is called NEMA for Neue machine, right? The new machine, effectively. It has a bunch of improvements over Enigma. I mentioned before the teleprinter keyboard. So because it's off a teleprinter, the far most keys for paper feed and stuff aren't working. It uses standard globes. The Enigma uses a special flat globe. This thing uses generic torch globes, which makes my life as a collector far easier, I can tell you. You'll notice the difference in the crypt engine. It has more rotors than Enigma. So an entry rotor and a reflector and 4 pairs of spinning rotors in between. And these are a very, very cool, very special Swiss innovation. I'll pull one out to show you why they're really interesting. What the Swiss managed to do was to build a machine that had a larger key space than Enigma, but was at the same time mechanically simpler. And this is the Swiss innovation. This is a Swiss rotor. I'll pass this one around as well so you can have a look. But effectively what this thing does is it comes in half. Right. And this part of the rotor here is the bit that remaps letters from a flat face to a spring-loaded face. And then they did this. There's a second half of the rotor, and it has multiple of these little lands and grooves, and each one of those in different positions is what drives the rotor rollover position. The best part of it is I can mix and match these things. I get 6 of those and 6 of those. And by the time I snap them together and create a free spinning combo, I've now generated a key space larger than Enigma, but without the fiddly steckers in the front. So that's a very neat innovation. Again, I need that back or my machine doesn't work. So kindly pass that around and bring it back when you're done. Now the setup for this machine is the same as Enigma. I release the tension on the rotors, clamp them together, and they come out of the machine and they sit on a spindle, and that's the reflector fixed on the spindle. Then I've got 4 pairs of those little wheels, and the entry rotor is fixed here. In fact, that's a very good view of the entry rotor. And although you can't see it here, there's a cable that enters underneath it, and it splays those contacts around the circumference so that when I drop this drum in, contact is made across that set of crypt wheels. When you latch that forward, the springs are then brought in contact with each other, and now the contacts are joined and now energy can flow through the crypt engine, right? Now, the key word, so the key material on this machine consists of the order in which I snap the letter substitution rotors together with the slip ring position rotors. And we just need a common keyword across two machines. And I'm going to call for a volunteer to help demo this. So we're going to have the word SecTalks. Where's the volunteer? Who wants to help? Come on then. I want you to adjust these wheels so that you can read SecTalk like this, SecTalk SYD across the bottom row. So SECTA, okay, across that row, SecTalk SYD. And then I'll need another volunteer to be on the second machine. And we're going to run a little decrypt exercise on these things. Who'd like to be my second volunteer? You're going to step up? Good, come on. Now, there's one other interesting thing about this particular machine, which is you'll notice that there's also an external lamp board, right? And if I press a key here, you're not only getting the result showing up on the lamp board on the top of the machine, you're also getting it showing up on this forward lamp here. So SecTalk SYD, right? I'm going to clamp that into position. And now these two machines are synchronized. So now we are effectively on both sides of a radio network. We've got a submarine with a machine, and we've got a base with a machine, synced and ready to exchange messages. And what I want you to do on this machine here is you're going to type in the word. Now, these are electromechanical machines, right? Push down a key fairly hard, and you've got to hold it at the bottom, because only when you've held it at the bottom does the electrical contact get made, which then lights up a lamp. And I didn't enough time to write that down. Right? So if you go blazing ahead and being a wildly efficient 21st century gen, whatever the hell you are, then I don't stand a bloody chance. Right. So S, press and hold it. Right.
C.
Right. SecTalk SYD. So C. Yep. Call them out as you do.
J.
Yep. You type in submarines.
Yep. K.
Yep.
U. R.
Yep.
H.
Yep.
J.
Yep.
K.
Yes.
W.
Mm-hmm.
T.
C. And our cipher text broken into two 5-letter groups is CJKURHJKWT. Now that's a bunch of Ks and stuff, but that's desirable. That's what I want, right? I want letters repeated in unpredictable ways across broken up groups. Now I want a second person. You're going to hop up. This time, I'm going to yell out the letters, and what we're looking for is the result coming up on the lamp board. Yep. So you ready? So C gives us an S. Amazing, right? So C, right? So J, K, U, R, H, J, K, W, P. There we go. Give him a hand.
Press from left.
Okay. That's a really obvious question. If someone presses the wrong letter, and we'll do it here, if I press the letter Q and then halfway down I go, oh, bloody hell, I've pressed the wrong letter. If I let that key go, then the mechanism is reset for the next key and it's gone. That opportunity is gone. But if I hold down that letter while it's still there and then go, oh, I meant to press the Z, another lamp will come up. Otherwise, I've got to reset my machine and do the whole thing again. Now, what have we done there?
One Enigma, you could just ask for like a bank in one place.
Yes.
In that one, it might be a little bit harder because they move in like randomized. So
Yep.
you must memorize which one moved, but in that case. you can
So the
just-
machine's deterministic. It's true. In a block of 100 letters, if there's one letter out, I can still work out what the meaning is. But if it needs to be exact because I'm giving coordinates or something, then it has to be yes.
Sorry, just I know there are a lot of questions. We're gonna keep it for the end, if that's
Yeah,
because
I'll-
people don't hear the question.
I'll come back to you.
Sorry about that.
Now, so far, what we've done is we've taken a manual cipher process, and over time, we've iterated it, and now we've electrified it, and we've turned it into an Enigma machine. This is awesome, right? It's quicker to generate really good quality ciphertext. This thing, of course, is only an incremental improvement. It's very nicely engineered, but it's basically a better Enigma. It hasn't engineered problems out of the process to do with key handling and other things like reliability. But now we get to this thing. And this is a whole different kettle of fish. What you're looking at is a fully restored and operational East German Stasi number station generation box. And what this thing does is now I'm beginning to computerize my cipher technology. I generate offline on a computer a whole bunch of one-time keys for cipher material, and I pump those in, and I basically create the keys as message tapes, or I keep them in the computer as serial. I then generate my encrypted message and I send it to this box, and what this box does is it converts it into speech, and that goes out over the airwaves. Now, the beautiful thing about this is, from my point of view as an operator, I never get to see the key material. I don't even necessarily get to see the encrypted message, right? It's all being handled by a computer that then pumps that into this machine. So this is called a Morse-Sprechgerät, right? It's a number speaking device or a Morse speaking device. And I can program it by the serial port, the punch tape on the front, or even on the front panel. And it does this little trick. So 93 calls out my handler number, and I'm like, that's my handler, I better listen. 467, 467, that's my agent number. So now I know I need to listen. Confirming it's for me. And now this long string of numbers comes down through the airwaves, typically over shortwave. And because of the way that radio propagation works, I can pick this up pretty much around the world, right? Nowadays, this is all done purely digital, but this is a very interesting glimpse into the methodology just at, I guess, the cusp of digital. And how do I engineer human hands off of the key material so I can pump it out into an encrypted message without anyone being able to compromise my crypt material? And so I use a one-time pad, a single key that drives that one message. I receive that message. I go to my one-time pad. As soon as I've decrypted it, I burn that page from my one-time pad and it's gone. And unless I'm tortured or whatever, no one is ever going to know that that communication has ever taken place with any attribution to me. I tune my radio at 11 o'clock on a Sunday or whenever I get my message. It comes on down. I carry out my task. I leave a chalk mark on a bin. Beautiful, right? And that's the way that the services still kind of operate today. Yeah. Now, where are those two rotors I was handing out? Can you bring those down the front? There's a black one there as well. You're welcome to come and have a look down the front after you've asked any questions you've got. So that's the demo bit done. Did we enjoy that? Was it interesting? And this opens up, I know, a huge number of questions, but I hope that now you've actually seen Enigma in action. It adds more context to the movies and you can appreciate what a bastard of a problem it was to do this stuff before it went digital. And I hope that kids who see this kind of understand the heritage of where we came from and get excited about STEM and mathematics and crypto and want to come and join us in the good fight, right? So there we go. So questions. Now you had one.
Yeah. I was going to ask, so the second generation had I saw a number row at the top as well.
Yep.
So just they had to infer what was going on with the numbers
No,
there?
you would send, sorry, that's a good question. So you would send like a leading indicator that says from here on in, I'm giving you longitude and latitude or artillery coordinates or whatever. Yep.
Right.
But it would still come as letters.
Yeah, so you'd have to like guess, or there'd be another
Yeah,
header.
A equals 1 and B equals 2 or whatever it may be.
Okay.
Yeah, because you don't want to be typing out German numbers longhand, do you? They're very long. Yeah. Yes.
Is that machine the one you just showed, the one that kind of originated number stations?
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Nice.
So that particular machine is a 1984 device manufactured by one of the East German state companies called Robotron. And Robotron were basically the computer company of East Germany. And there were multiple of these state enterprises involved in churning out this kind of equipment. But that one there, the ROMs. So the reason it speaks German is because in the back, we have almost PC architecture, and they were making PCs in East Germany. There is a removable card, and that's the German language ROMs on that card. And you could also, there was a version of this which had a sort of a flip mechanism, and you could have a dual language or Russian or Spanish. And so that's what the Cubans use, right? The Cubans use this same machine, just with the Spanish language ROMs in it. Yeah.
How vulnerable is Bentley or is it perfect?
I have a separate slide at the end, which we kind of ran out of time for, which is about the compromise of Enigma. So the Polish Cipher Bureau were compromising Enigma as early as the early 1930s. They could see war coming, and they put a huge amount of effort into analysing cipher traffic. And there's a number of Poles who, honestly, work of genius. They came up with various techniques to crack Enigma. An early one was that they produced a grid with 2 alphabets on it. And the mathematician behind that, Zygalski, they called them Zygalski sheets. And they literally went through a laborious amount of time to reverse engineer what would be the next letter that comes out on a given rota. If I think that I'm dealing with rota number 2 in the first slot, and if the first letter that comes out is an F, then the letter that I think is going to come out next is a Q. And they reversed engineered all of this work to hand punch sequences of these cards. And then when you line the cards up together, if light shines through, then you know that position is true. So that's one thing they did. Then they built a machine called a cyclometer. And a cyclometer was a funny, and one has been rebuilt in either Cambridge or Oxford as a mathematics project. And a cyclometer basically recreates the wiring, the internal wiring of a rotor. And it allows me with a lever to test all of the other positions of the rotor against that internal mechanism within the cyclometer. And the third one they came up with was called bomba. So bomb meaning, and it's a kind of a joke, right? Because bomba means apparently like a sweet cake in Polish, so some sort of nice present. And the bomba was a machine which allowed them to test multiple rotor positions. And then finally, they created Enigma analogs. They reverse engineered the Enigma machine and they built their own Enigma. So it's very vulnerable. Yeah.
So you mentioned about the small plugs down in the Enigma, like the way you can map letters.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So what do they actually do? Like, because I think I missed it out in the demo or something.
Yep.
But like, what exactly are they supposed to do, like over there?
So on the 23rd of October 44, I'm instructed to go to my sheet and take these cables and to map, say, the letter Q, which is an open slot here, and I plug that in there, and I take the other end of it, and I'm going to map it into the letter R. And I do that with all 10 cables that I get issued. And that's another weakness of Enigma. Because we captured Enigma operational books, we knew that the Germans, without fail, every day mapped exactly 10 letters. Now, if I'd given you 12 cables, and one day you mapped 1 letter, and another day you mapped 11, and the day after you mapped 7, you would have created an impossible problem to reverse engineer that. But because I knew, without fail, that you would always map 10 letters, I could create an analog for the Enigma, a mechanical representation of how it operated, which is what the bomb machine was. And I could test those permutations for exactly 10 letters. And it was when the German Kriegsmarine, the submarine Enigma, was found to have 4 rotors. Suddenly that broke all of the bomb machines that were built in Britain, as they were built with 3 rotors. And that was when the American NCR company had to come in and build a 4-rotor machine. Now that's just a rotor change. That's just the number of rotors. Imagine if I'd given the Germans free rein to use anywhere between 1 and 12 cables every day. But because I knew they'd use 10, I could build an analog for that. Yeah. Thank you.
One more question, please. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could ask, I mean, obviously, you've done a fantastic presentation of how the machine works, and I thank you for that. But I suppose it's part of a separate presentation is what were the breakthroughs in Blacksley Park or elsewhere that actually allowed the cracking of this machine?
In my view, the most significant were the Polish capture of some code material. So there was a German called Hans Thilo Schmidt, who was in France, and he basically betrayed a lot of operational material about Enigma. That material went through the French to the Polish Cipher Bureau, and with that information from Hans Thilo Schmidt plus information they captured elsewhere, they were able to compromise Enigma operation, but they also got a lucky break. I'm told that an Enigma was accidentally delivered to the wrong address in Poland. And when it went to the wrong address, the police and a bunch of other people were suddenly on the phone demanding that the incorrect recipient do not open that box. Whatever you do, it's under the control of the Reich. And the guy was like, well, no, it's not actually. And they opened the box and they were able to photograph components, and that information plus other stuff went into the Polish knowledge. Now, remember what I told you. They created the Zagalski sheets, the cyclometer, the bomb, and a working Enigma analog, all before World War II. And then as the Germans invaded Poland, they escaped to France, and they were hiding out in France. And then as the Germans penetrated further into France, they took that information onto the UK. Bletchley would not have been able to do it without, or certainly not nearly in the amount of time without that work by the Poles.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, unfortunately, just because of the time commitment, I know there is a lot of questions left. So we just want to do a few last minute things before we close it down, but Mike will be there. But definitely I would say what you are doing, Mike, is great. And thanks for doing it
Thank
for
you.
the
Thanks all
community,
for
for
coming along,
everyone
yeah.
here and all the setup. So maybe one more round of applause for Mike.